It doesn't matter. All right. Good morning, and thank you for inviting representatives of the Colorado College and the United States Air Force Academy debate teams to debate the merits of the Republican and Democratic presidential candidates, Governor Mitt Romney and President Barack Obama. My name is JULIAN PLAZA, and I'm the current director of the CC debate program. Debate at CC is actually an almost century-long tradition, and so today's event follows that rich lineage. Colorado College actually, one of our members invented the current style of debate that we do in the National Parliamentary Debate Association, and that man was James Al Johnson, who we hold a commemorative tournament in his name, which happened actually just this past weekend in this auditorium. We travel across the country, all over the place, anywhere from University of Texas at Austin to Western Washington in Bellingham, Washington. I actually had a hand in crafting the format of this debate that you're about to witness, and the format is based on one of our nation's oldest forms of presidential debate, that is Lincoln-Douglas debate. So what you're about to see will be several constructive speeches which are used to establish the position of each team, and these will last anywhere between 6 and 7 minutes. Hopefully our contestants will keep to time better than the presidential candidates. And the first two speeches will be followed by a 3-minute period of cross-examination by the opposing debaters. What I hope this format allows for is for you to see prepared statements as well as argument and responses that are thought up on the spot. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to the debaters. From the Colorado College, we have sophomores Jacob Kirksey and Nick Blanchette. Sorry, guys. And from the United States Air Force Academy, we have cadets Andrew Gallion, who's a senior, and Brian Kruchkow, who's a freshman. Speaking first will be the Colorado College, affirming the resolution that Mitt Romney should be elected president to the United States federal government. This has been decided because it didn't seem right to request the cadets to debate against their current commander-in-chief. Thank you, and enjoy the debate.
Before I begin the speech, I'd just like to take a second to formally thank the Blue Key Honor Society for allowing us to showcase a little bit of what we do here on campus. And with that, let's get it started. Today in America, 23 million individuals are unemployed. These 23 million people wait, on average, 40 weeks before finding a new job. And those that don't find a job often drop out of the workforce and rely on government welfare as a means to survive. Is this just? Is it just for 23 million people to be out of work? Are the 23 million better off today than they were 4 years ago? The 23 million are mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends and neighbors. They're the man you see walking on the other side of Nevada Avenue, the graduate you know from Colorado College, the foundation of America. The 23 million are the ones that have been left behind under President Obama. Because we believe in the 23 million, we, the team from Colorado College, affirm that former Governor Mitt Romney ought to be the next president of the United States of America. The economy is the most important issue to discuss this morning in relation to the election for 2 reasons. First, polls state that the economy is the most important issue for likely voters, and second, a strong and stable economy functions as the precondition for the success of other policies. Policies like healthcare and energy are directly connected to economic strength. Without a growing economy, America cannot invest in vital programs. At a most basic level, economic strength fuels American strength, making it the most important issue in the election and in our debate today. When comparing the 2 candidates on economic issues, it becomes clear that only an adoption of Mitt Romney's policies allows the rejuvenation of America's economy. The first argument in favor of Governor Mitt Romney is his promise to reduce runaway deficit spending. Cutting deficit spending is the only way to keep the United States economy less reliant on foreign countries and borrowing. Under President Obama, we have seen spending skyrocket and our debt balloon. Former Governor Mitt Romney would solve this by reducing federal spending to 20% of the GDP, its pre-crisis level. The next argument in favor of Governor Mitt Romney is his tax policy. Mitt Romney has advocated the removal of various deductions, loopholes, penalties, and subsidies in order to simplify America's tax code and to fund lower, flatter rates across the board. Doing so would be beneficial in several ways. First, simplifying the tax code would save an extraordinarily large amount of money. According to the Office of Management and Budget, Americans spend over $400 billion a year trying to comply with or circumvent America's tax code. By simplifying America's tax code into a lower, flatter rate, businesses save high amounts of money each year and operate on a more level playing field, stripped of unfair economic gamesmanship. Second, a simplified tax code promotes increased economic activity, particularly at the corporate level. Simply put, a more basic tax code makes it easier to organize economic plans and fosters an environment in which businesses worry less about navigating various obstacles of the tax code and more about putting people back to work. And third, lower, flatter tax rates remove barriers to small business entrepreneurship. Tax compliance is a substantial expense. With lower, flatter tax, this expense would be reduced. Since small businesses are the largest generator of new jobs, the economy would benefit as a whole. And fourth, even tax accountants benefit because they get to redirect their genius towards new enterprise as opposed to helping others cheat the system, so everybody wins. Another key pillar of Romney's policy is his proposal to lower the corporate tax rate from one of the highest in the world at 35% to a much more competitive 25%. This has two major effects. First, lowering America's corporate tax rate promotes increased foreign investment into our markets. This inflow of capital helps businesses fund job-creating ventures and allows the United States to focus on rebuilding our economic infrastructure. Secondly, lowering the corporate tax code makes American businesses more competitive. With a high corporate tax rate, businesses have an incentive to shift jobs overseas and divert American money to other nations. Thus, lower corporate tax rates make business in America competitive again, allowing for jobs and capital to return to the shores of the United States. The next argument in favor of Governor Romney is his pledge to energy independence. In the status quo, Obama's energy policies have only made us more reliant on foreign energy. His poor investments in alternative energy, as opposed to investing in natural resources in North America, have already cost the American economy enough money. Just look at Solyndra. Governor Romney will invest in the development of America's natural resources. Doing so will create millions of jobs, not only in the energy sector, but in industries that rely heavily on cheap energy options as they free up income to spend on growth. America's economy will boom when the billions of dollars spent for oil overseas comes back to our shores. Lastly, Governor Romney will provide Americans with the skills to succeed through better public schools, better access to higher education, and better retraining programs that help to match unemployed workers with real-world job opportunities. Obama's blanket spending policy for our education system has done little in the way of making our students competitive globally on the global market. Through increased investment in our students and the retention of the Pell Grant program, Americans can become the most competitive workers in the world once again. Finally, a white paper study of Mitt Romney's economic plan done by economists of Columbia, Harvard, and Stanford universities concluded that the economic pillars of Romney's plan will increase 250,000 jobs a month over a 4-year period. This totals 12 million new jobs under the Romney plan. The new direction that Governor Romney poses for the United States is thus critical to the 23 million and for putting America firmly back on track to power once again. Thank you.
I'd like to also begin my cross-examination time with a hearty thank you to the Colorado College community for welcoming us here today. I really appreciate you inviting us down here. This is going to be a great debate. So my first question for Team Romney is what's the governor's position on health care reform in the United States in today's modern society?
Sure. Romney's position on health care is that he would repeal Obamacare and restructure Medicaid by turning it into a block grant system. This would return Medicaid back to states. Mitt Romney believes that this would be better for healthcare as a whole because states are always going to be more conditioned at providing unique types of healthcare to their own constituents as opposed to a blanket approach from the federal government.
Do you have a question? And do you think this devolving the authority for healthcare to the states is going to, are you concerned with the lack of uniformity such a move could cause?
No, not at all, because varying healthcare system is actually what makes healthcare unique in the United States and efficient, because you have several different organizations and systems that healthcare goes through, not only hospitals, doctors, but also insurance companies. And so putting that on a uniform system will not only increase the power insurance companies have over doctors and patients by hiking rates, but also will decrease the efficiency of our system.
To talk a little bit about economic issues, you said that Governor Romney's going to cut the deficit spending. Could you articulate to me exactly what you think our biggest problem in terms of deficit spending is right now? What's the short-term risk to continuing our current deficit spending scenario?
You can go for that.
So your question is what's the biggest short-term risk at the moment?
Yeah, why should we stop deficit spending?
Well, in the status quo, deficit spending has been increased to the point where we owe dangerous amounts of money to foreign countries. Our argument is that this dependence on foreign countries is bad for American growth because we have to first rely on our prior debt obligations. So just the blanket increase of deficit spending produces a cyclical effect in which Americans perpetually have to owe to foreign countries. American investment goes out of the United States. We argue that this is a bad thing. Our advocacy is specifically that we need to bring jobs back to the United States, and we need to bring back this flow of capital.
Thank you. And my final question for cross-examination is, what's Governor Romney's position on same-sex marriage?
Romney's position on same-sex marriage is exactly Obama and Biden's position in 2008, which is it is left up to the states ultimately.
Thank you. I yield the rest of my time to the floor. Do you have a timer? Yeah.
All right, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is the jobs, because that seems to be a big concern in this upcoming election on whether Obama should be reelected or not. And what I want to show you is that in 2009, right after Obama had been elected, the unemployment rate was 10.1%. Now, I can't say that you can give him an excuse for all 4 years, right? Because he can't always blame Bush on everything. But 10.1% is very high. And now you see that it's 8.2%. You see that Obama's policies are working. The unemployment rate is dropping. That is 30 million people were out of work in 2009, while they admit that 23 million are out of work today. So we are putting people back to work. I would like to say that Obama's policies on work are working. And then they touched on health care. We'd like to say that this is a fallacy. They say that states will have a better ability to tailor health care to their specific people. But we'll show you that states won't even enact healthcare policies. There are some states that are so conservative that they will not want a massive healthcare system in their state. And so you can't be getting healthcare to people in that state if the state will not enact healthcare policies. So you see that President Obama is correct in passing the Affordable Health Care Act because it needs to be a national issue. It needs to be passed so that as a widespread baseline, everyone gets healthcare. It's not, should one person in this state get health care while another state is excluding its citizens from health care. People need health care. People need to be able to go to the doctors and get the medication that they see fit for themselves and that the doctors see fit for their health. And we'd like to say that they say that we'll reduce deficit spending and that we won't rely on foreign governments. What I want to show you is that last year, when the deficit went up by $1.1 trillion, only 23% of it is foreign bought. You know what that shows me? That shows me that 77% of it is bought by Americans buying our bonds and buying our CDs. And you know what that shows me? That shows me that Americans actually believe in our economy. They know that if they buy that CD, when that CD is ready to expire and they're ready to get their money back, they know the American economy will be strong and they'll be able to get their money back. And only 8% of it is going to China. A lot of people believe that China is taking up a lot of our debt, but that is not true. Only 8% of $1.1 trillion went to China. We're showing you that Americans still believe in our economy because Americans are still buying our own debt. We're still buying America. And we want to show you that that is what Obama has done. That is the hope that he has created within people. He's allowed us to buy our own debt. and he has allowed us to he has showed us that we can trust in our own economy, and when it's time for that bond or that CD to mature, that money will be there. And also, they say that the tax policies that Mr. Romney will close loopholes and he'll cut corporate tax, but we'd like to ask him what loopholes he'll cut. He hasn't told the American people what loopholes he'll cut. Will he cut loopholes for mortgages? Will he cut loopholes for children? We don't know. And that's kind of risky. We know that President Obama, as far as his tax policy, he doesn't want the middle class to be strained with taxes. He wants to increase it a little bit on the people that are making over $250,000 a year. They're currently paying 30% of our taxes, and we want to show you that that is not enough, that they can pay a little bit more without being strained, and we don't need to strain the middle class if you're wanting to create middle-class jobs. If you're wanting to grow small business, you can't tax those small businesses more. And also, we already have the second lowest tax rate among first world nations. We don't need to cut that tax rate anymore to grow business. And then on their energy independence, from 2010 to 2011, we cut oil imports by 10%. President Obama is not wanting us to be dependent on foreign oil. He wants us to be able to have an energy source that we have within our own nation. He wants us to have clean energy as well. We can't just start drilling oil off our own shores. We can't just start drilling oil on federal land. We have to start making clean energy, or we will be behind in the world's economy if we don't. He's increased subsidies for green energy by 35%. He has a clear policy that he wants green energy and he wants less dependence on oil. He's shown us that. And then you say that education, that spending doesn't increase scores, spending doesn't increase degrees, but you know what spending does? It does allow more people to go to college. And that's what we want to show you is a good thing. Not everybody's going to graduate with a 4.0. Not everybody's going to graduate from high school with an awesome GPA and be able to get into the best college. But we want to at least give that opportunity to students. We want to allow those students that have a desire and a dream to go further. We don't want to hamper them because of money. We want to allow the federal government to give money to those students that deserve it so that they can go to a college, get a degree, and then get into the workforce. As we've showed you, he is allowing jobs to be created in America. And then on the last issue, President Obama has a clear-cut ideology on gays' rights, women's rights, and human rights as a whole. You see that his first act he signed was the Lilly Ledbetter Act, allowing equal pay for women in the workforce. We believe this is a good thing because it's not a women's rights issue, it's a human rights issue. We should all be paid the same if we are equal and if we can produce the same. And you see that as far as gays' rights, that's not a gays' rights issue, that's a human right issue. They should be allowed to marry the person that they love, and they should be allowed to get benefits if they so choose for their spouses. Right now, under the current status quo, they can't go in, a partner can't go into his or hers her partner's hospital room and just request a visit. You can't do that. You also can't move your benefits over to your partner under the current laws. And you see that President Obama wants to start moving towards human rights. It's not gays' rights, it's not women's rights, it's human rights. And President Obama has a clear-cut stance while Governor Romney doesn't really want to talk about that. He knows that that's unpopular. He knows that that is not an issue that the American people, that it will resound with them and that they will get behind him on. Because when you come to human rights, all of us should be equal. Thank you.
So my first question is, can you explain to us the candidate you're defending, Obama, and his position on gay rights in 2008?
I'm not really sure what his position in 2008, what relevance that holds to the election in 2012. So if you could redirect that question.
Yeah, absolutely. If he didn't make the change in the first 4 years of his presidency, what makes you think he'll make the change now?
Well, I'd have to disagree that it didn't make a change. As a member of the armed forces, with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I'd say I have a pretty clear-cut example of a change that the chief executive did make.
What has President Barack Obama done towards promoting a system of same-sex marriage in the United States?
I think the obstacle that the president faces is one of states' rights, and that's what we see in the status quo, is that each state has a different stance.
So you conclude that it's state rights that decide same-sex marriage, correct?
Right or wrong in the status quo, that's the situation we face, yes.
Then why are we discussing same-sex marriage if it's an issue of states' rights?
Our position is that it shouldn't be one of states' rights, and that's something the chief executive can and will work towards.
Okay. So we can just drop it there. What part of Obama's healthcare plan do you specifically think will help people who currently need medication that aren't receiving it? Specifically, what part of Obamacare?
President Obama's plan takes $716 billion, and that's an increase by 20% of what current Medicaid and Medicare costs are.
And where does that $716 billion go to?
$716 billion goes to people getting health care. It increases the baseline of the amount of people getting health care, and it increases what people can actually access as far as that health care.
But you are aware in 2013 everyone's premium rates will increase, correct? Except for those who currently are under pre-existing conditions. But every other healthy American, their premium rates will increase. Are you aware of that?
Every other healthy American's premium rates increase, but we allow other people who don't have any health care to get health care. They'll be able to get medical coverage. And we see that as important and vital to a system where, yes, those people that have health care, their rates might go up a little bit, but we want the people that don't have any at all to be allowed to access health care.
So in your speech, you said that reducing unemployment to 8.2% was a success, correct?
I'd say that's a move in the right direction.
How do you explain this in light of the Obama administration's insistence that his economic plan would reduce unemployment to 5.6% by 2012?
I'd say that many politicians make promises that once reality hits, they can't come true, right? But 10.1% to 8.2%, that's a pretty good record.
8% unemployment has been steady for a long time. Like, what is the justification as to why it's suddenly going to decrease?
It's not suddenly going to decrease. We haven't seen a sudden drop in unemployment, but it is going in the right direction. 10.1 to 8.2 is going down.
Okay, so I'm going to address the arguments they presented in the same order. First, starting with jobs. Their first argument is that Obama has decreased the unemployment rate from 10.1% to 8.2%. One, I checked the latest statistics from the Labor and Bureau statistics to support your case better, because it's not 8.2% still. But one, he promised that it would be at 5.6% by 2012. And we've seen that the economy is actually not growing right now. You're seeing more and more people are actually moving out of the workforce and stop looking for work, which means that they're dropping themselves from the Bureau of Labor statistics in what our labor force consists of. So you have not proven to us that your drop in unemployment rate actually indicates that jobs are being created in a productive manner. In fact, we can look at this by the first quarter in 2012 grew at a rate of 2%. And if the Obama administration insists that the economy is growing, we'll look at the last quarter statistics, where we see that the second quarter grew at 1.5%. The economy is not getting better, it is getting worse under the policies of the Obama administration. And history has shown us that when the deeper recession you get into goes, the faster your recovery should be. And we've seen that the recovery of the Obama administration is late, and not really relevant, because we're seeing that the Obama administration's policies do not signify any sort of recovering economic health. And then we move on to your argument about healthcare, where you say that this is not a state's issue anymore, it needs to be a nationalized healthcare system, and that states won't like having their own healthcare. Well, one, I disagree, because having states prioritize their own healthcare system allows them to feed companies within their states, making it an issue at home rather than an issue abroad. And second, we've seen that through massive deficit spending, you're making this issue worse. You have not justified why deficit spending is a good thing, and I'll get onto that later when you talk about foreign governments. But the second argument is that you're actually hurting those people by nationalizing the healthcare system, because as we've discussed previously, most people's premium rates will increase in 2013, and money is a tool to get the healthcare that you need. So trying to nationalize it and subsidize healthcare through government regulations gives doctors the ability to value a healthy person's healthcare as someone with pre-existing condition. But if you know that that person with a pre-existing condition is going to pay you more, you are going to take care of them better and give them the health care they need. You are allowing doctors to escape this policy and basically be lazy in the US economy. And third, we move on to the foreign government, where you say that foreign deficit only holds 23% of our debt. But that is still a large amount and is larger than any other presidency in history. We've seen that China has over $1 trillion of US national debt, and the Obama administration has not suddenly made this we're making our debt a priority at home. In fact, they have increased foreign deficit fraction in our debt, making this not an Obama administration phenomenon. This is something that's going on for years in the presidency, where, yes, a lot of our debt is held at home, but the Obama administration hasn't changed that. You've only increased our foreign debt. And then moving on to your next argument, where you talk about how what loopholes will Romney cut? And the deduction for interest income on state and local bonds are the types of cuts we're looking at. Income related to inside buildup of life insurance products. He advocates placing a cap on individual deductions so individuals could only save a flat rate of deduction. Aside from certain loopholes in deduction, Romney has suggested that a debate would happen congressionally. So we know that tax policy is a very bipartisan issue. At both sides of the aisle want to make our tax policy simpler, and Romney has actually proposed a plan closing deductions. But what Romney does differentiate himself from Obama is that he doesn't want to increase the capital gains tax, and he wants to make it easier for small businesses to file as an individual, increasing the amount of jobs in America. Obama wants to tax small businesses. He wants to tax those people who file at over $250,000 a year. And I'm sorry, but many individuals who own their own business do file as individuals. And so with Obama's tax policy, you're increasing those tax hikes on 52% of our economy, small business. And that's a negative side effect. And Romney overall wants to lower taxes across the board, and you haven't really contested that. So on to energy independence. You keep repeating to yourself that, Obama has shown us that he wants to promote energy independence. But I want to ask how? Under what policy? If you're talking about Solyndra, where he wasted billions of dollars in California under the solar energy company, then I don't really know what other justification you have. Romney, on the other hand, wants to promote good economic health in the status quo in order to increase energy independence and clean energy independence in the future. You cannot have economic travesty without looking towards energy independence in your country. And Romney wants to increase drilling, which increases millions of jobs in our country today. And Obama doesn't want to do that. He's increased the amount of oil we've bought from Saudi Arabia and other countries abroad. And Romney wants to bring the jobs back home and increase energy production in the United States. And finally, on to education. We also want to invest in education too. Romney says nothing about decreasing funding for education. We want to focus. The difference between us and Obama is that Romney is more student focused. He wants to work more on student accountability standards rather than teacher accountability standards through Race to the Top, No Child Left Behind, these flawed policies that Obama has continued to pursue and just amend slightly. Romney is more focused on the student and making that individual student better. Obama is teacher-focused, and so if you're looking for the difference in education, that's where we differ. But other than that, we still want to invest in education, and we still want to make it the future for America as well.
I'd like to begin the final speech for the negative team in today's debate by again extending a round of thank yous to the entire Colorado College community. We really do appreciate being invited to this debate, and I think I speak for everyone here when we say that if the real presidential debates could be so civil, I think our country would be better off. So thank you very much to the affirmative team. So what am I going to do in this rebuttal speech? I'd like to present some key questions, and I'm going to show you the key delineations between what we feel Governor Romney's view, outlook for the future of America is, and what we believe President Obama's outlook is. And I think the key questions in today's debate, in the presidential debate, comes down to one of the economy, one of healthcare, and one of human rights. So let's start on economy. I think the economy can be broken down into two main areas I want to focus on. The first, jobs, taxes. We're talking specifically fiscal policy that the president might have a hand in. And I think the easiest summary of differences between President Obama's outlook on these sorts of policies and Governor Romney's policies is one versus high earners, CEOs, the high achievers, the top level, the corporate captains of America versus the average middle-class worker. And I think it's often summarized as the trickle-down approach. That's what Governor Romney wants. And I think that we have to ask ourselves at the end of the day, do we believe the trickle-down approach worked? And I'd like to go back to my partner's arguments talking about what we've seen since President Obama took office. In 2009, when unemployment was extremely high, we say that we believe that's a direct correlation to the fiscal policies that were in place from the administration prior to President Obama. And that's one that we would see a return with if we elect Governor Romney. And I think that's a policy where we see less regulation on high earners, we see less regulations on large corporations. And I don't see how Romney can argue that small business owners or large business owners getting more money is going to somehow make the middle class better. I don't see how a high-paid CEO of GM prevented that organization from going bankrupt. It obviously didn't. We see that the foundation of America is its workers. If you have small business owners, if you have large business owners who are earning more money, who have easier tax breaks, who have an easier time getting around regulations, they still need workers, and they need workers who are healthy, who are happy, who are economically viable. We believe that President Obama's policies focus on these middle-class workers. It's a building up from a foundation rather than a trickling-down effect. If we have workers who don't have access to stable health care, which I'll talk about in a second, if we don't have workers who have access to buying the goods and services they need to survive and enjoy a good quality of life, then we're going to see companies that don't thrive. It's common sense. Companies are based on their workers, not on their leaders. Leaders are important. They provide a strategic vision. But without workers on the front lines doing their job every day, companies fail. It's inevitable. So we see that we side with President Obama and believe that we must build from the bottom up, specifically on the areas of jobs and taxes, which we believe are closely interrelated. Let's talk about energy policy. I think this is one where Governor Romney is just clearly losing. And they point out the issue with Solyndra, and I think that that's a very wise lesson that we should take about giving subsidies to green energy corporations. But I would say I'd much rather have made one mistake in a transition to green energy than to stick with something we know, namely fossil fuels. I don't think that fossil fuels are sustainable. Common sense tells us that fossil fuels are not sustainable and they're bad for the environment. And I would say that we must begin a transition to a sustainable green energy industry. And I think subsidies are the only viable way to provide that upstart to that industry. They aren't commercially viable in our free market today, but we can see the evidence is clear that we must begin that transition because it's the only viable way for our country to maintain its security and its strength into the future. Yes, Solyndra was it's an important learning lesson that we must take into account as we move forward into a change to green energy, not just sticking with fossil fuels because Solyndra didn't work out. And so let's talk about what Governor Romney wants to do on energy. He wants to increase domestic drilling. We agree this is going to increase jobs locally. Of course it is. But we also agree that the green industry at home can create jobs. People have to assemble wind turbines. People have to invest in research and development on new green energy forms. People are working and employed in the green energy technology industry. And as I've already stated, the evidence is clear that in terms of the environment and a politically viable energy source, green energy is the only way to go. You're talking about a short-term versus a long-term solution. I think that anyone concerned with the long-term health of America can quite clearly see that we must begin a transition to green technology now before it's too late. The short-term job advantage from drilling for domestic oil does not outweigh the gloomy future that America faces when we reach perhaps peak oil or when we reach a situation where we have to begin increasing foreign oil imports. And that's going to undermine our political credibility, our political strength throughout the world. Green energy offers a way for us to respect the environment and provide an economically viable and economically strong industry here at home. It's going to be domestic. It's good for America in every single way. And I think President Obama is the best advocate for a green energy changeover. So let's talk about health care. President Obama's health care mandate that all Americans receive health insurance combined with this widening of the window my partner talked about of availability of federal health care supplementation
basically means at the end of the day that we see more Americans being insured than under Governor Romney's plan. Governor Romney wants a state-specific plan, but I think we've already pointed out that when you give issues to the states, there's a lack of uniformity. As my partner pointed out, we run a risk of states who, for whatever reason, don't want to pass this sort of health care reform. Well, what does that all mean? What does it boil down to? It boils down to a situation where not every American in the United States is insured. The common sense answer here is that every American must have health insurance. As a former worker in the healthcare industry, I see the devastation that's caused when someone comes in with a serious medical issue without health insurance. The system does not function. The drain on the system from people not being uninsured is far greater than the premium increase that the other side advocates. So I say that we must take that into consideration when looking at healthcare. Let's go to my concluding point of human rights. I think my partner is very wise in saying that this isn't a woman's rights issue. It's not a gay right issue. It's a human right issue. And I think the other team is very leery of approaching this issue simply because they know they're wrong, and they know Governor Romney's wrong. The question is very simple. Should women and should members of the homosexual community be treated as equals? The only answer to that question is yes. And what do I mean specifically? What sort of policies can we advocate? Well, I think the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, as I mentioned in cross-examination, is a very clear way that we can accept members of the gay community as equal. We've seen the military hasn't fallen apart. The Air Force Academy hasn't fallen apart because we've allowed gays to serve openly. And so we see that the economy hasn't fallen apart because we've forced women to receive equal pay. So I don't see why we wouldn't advocate human rights issues. So let me go ahead and wrap up. My time's running short. I think the question in today's debate is whether we want to return to policies that we've seen fail in the past because we're comfortable with them. That's what we're comfortable with. We want to go back to the old ways of doing things, or whether we want to move forward and whether we want to be progressive and advocate change. I'm talking about economic change, I'm talking about healthcare reform, and I'm talking about human rights reforms. I think President Obama is the only candidate in this election who truly has the best interests of all Americans in mind when making his policies. And I urge you to specifically go out and vote in the coming election and express your view, one way or another. I think voting is the most important thing, but I think that, as you can see at the end of today's arguments, President Obama should be the clear winner. Thank you.
Before I begin, I'd just like to extend the thank yous that our opponents had done at the beginning of their last speech. Really appreciate this opportunity. In a world where 23 million Americans remain unemployed, the American economy remains stagnant, and investment is still in flight to foreign countries, we cannot afford another 4 years of President Obama. We have seen Obama's plans in action, and we have seen the devastating effect that a consistent 8% unemployment rate has had on individuals in America. Their calls to reform taxes and boost the economy are hollow promises and political pandering at best. President Obama has had this opportunity to restore America and set it back on track for the last 4 years, but we've only seen the opposite occur. At the end of this debate, you must ask yourself whether or not an America in which an 8% unemployment rate with 23 million people out of work is a just America. Obama's decidedly anti-growth policies have done enough damage, and America must be set on a different course. I'm going to go through the issues as they happened in this round. Let's look at the first one, deficit spending. Their only argument here on deficit spending is that we don't owe that much to foreign countries. Our argument is that owing 23% of our debt is a significant amount of money and that we need to reduce this in any way that we can. They provide no justifications as to why having a high deficit is a good thing in the first place. By reducing our deficit spending level to only 20% of the GDP, we think that this is the best way to go about lowering our debt level and setting back a system in which we can invest in jobs again in the United States. Next, let's go to the tax code and tax code simplicity. They don't directly respond to any of the taxes arguments. Their only argument here is this blanket assumption that middle-class taxes will increase under President Romney, yet they don't substantiate this at all. Remember, at the beginning of our speech, we said specifically that Romney's plan is to simplify the tax code in order to pay for lower, flatter rates across the board. This means taxes are decreased across the board. This allows for a top-down approach in which employers have more funds in order to invest in programs that create jobs. This is the most important important thing that this is the most important aspect of this debate is jobs and the economy. Remember at the beginning of the round when I said that a strong economy is the foundation for pushing forth other policies. In order to push forth good healthcare policies or good energy policies, we first need to have a strong economy in which jobs are being created. They're not responding to any of the economic arguments coming out of our case. We think that they are still on the table and still important. Now let's look at the corporate tax rate. They said in the last speech that we need to build from the bottom up, and that's what Obama's plan calls for. That's what's been in place for the last 4 years, and unemployment is still at 8%. We don't see jobs increasing. Our argument is that we have to go from the top-down approach. We need to help employers by lowering the corporate tax rate. This is the only way to promote growth. When growth happens, there are more jobs, and more jobs equals better pay and more people, or less than 23 million people being unemployed. Now let's go to energy. They argue that energy needs to be sustainable now. Our argument is that Romney wants to focus on fossil fuels now in the future in order to get our economy back on track, in order to have actual money to invest in green energy, because we don't have this money in the status quo. It's just been coming from deficit spending, which is only putting our country further in debt. Next, let's look at healthcare. They don't understand the healthcare debate at all. The federal government, our argument is that the federal government will provide block grants to states. This is money that the states are forced to use for their own individual healthcare systems. Their argument that conservative states just don't care about healthcare and will take it away is absolutely ridiculous. Let's look at the human rights debate finally. Our argument on the human rights is that it's fundamentally a state issue. They say that we're shifting out of this debate because we don't want to debate it. While that might be true, that doesn't change the question that this is, at its basis, a state issue. Romney hasn't made any plans to change this. At the end of the debate, we urge that you look to Mitt Romney first, because America can't afford another 4 years of President Obama. We think that Governor Mitt Romney ought to be the next president of the United States of America, as he will firmly put this country back on track. Thank you.
Hello. While this hereby concludes today's debate in a formal manner, I'd like to give a big round of applause for our speakers and debaters here. Thank you much. Thank you much. To a wonderful turnout from today's crowd, CC campus community members, we couldn't do this without you as well. To JULIAN PLAZA for providing some of the structure and logistical work for today's event. That was huge. Thank you very much. In addition, sponsors for today's event were provided in large part by the Political Science Department, notably Andy Dunham. So thank you to him wherever he is right now. And for a final plug, we'd like to encourage people to continue the debate in an informal manner by fostering a discursive environment across the way, just across Cascade Avenue in East Rastel. We have one large table reserved there in East Rastel. We'd like to kind of continue the presidential election discussion over there over lunch, and we invite you all to come and join us there. Thank you much.